I wanted to dive into this Pac-12 story in an intelligent way, probably a more intelligent way than you're going to hear, frankly, anywhere in sports media today. So if you're not aware, the Pac-12 players and the exact numbers of them is unclear, but a large group of them wrote an open letter titled "We Are United" in the Players Tribune. And they basically said NCAA sports exploit college athletes physically, economically, and academically, and also disproportionately harm black college athletes. And they are demanding a lot of different things. And they also posted "We Are United" on social media. And there were a lot of attention that this got. And they are demanding a lot of different aspects here. But much of what they are demanding is that, and some of them, like, you're going to look at and you're going to be like, okay, yeah, it makes sense that you should have as much coronavirus protection in the event that you're going to play. A lot of the demands are not particularly surprising and not even remotely controversial in terms of what they want. But the reports are, again, that there are a lot of players involved. And again, I'm going to run through what they want because I think a lot of media will overavoid it. COVID protections, I think everybody out there would appreciate that pretty much everywhere. They want to protect all sports. I think that probably makes sense. But they want 50% of each sport's total revenue to be evenly distributed among all the athletes in that sport. And that in particular is really the essence of this decision, I think, when you really get down to it. Because a lot of other things can be negotiated, and you can talk about, hey, we want to make you safe, we want to protect you, we want to make sure that that you are getting the best education that you can, and that since the small minority of you will actually go pro, we want to make sure that when you leave our institutions, you're prepared to succeed in life. This is, by the way, why my number one story, and I tell my kids this, I would tell this to anybody who's out there listening, that is a coach, that is a parent. If you're a kid and you're in the car with your parents right now, the number one lesson that I think needs to come for sports, for kids of all ages, is use the ball. Don't let the ball use you. There are a lot of ways that your athletic talents can be exploited, which do not benefit you. You have to be smart enough to use the ball to advance your interest economically, educationally, financially, every possible way that you can. Use the ball. Don't let the ball use you. Okay? Now, here are the problems. Let me just take a step back. I am a capitalist. I want all of you out there listening to me right now to make as much money as you possibly can, whether you are an athlete or whether you are working right now at Walmart or whether you are a lawyer or whether you are a neurosurgeon or whether you are a janitor at a school. I want all of you out there to participate in ownership society. I want you to have, whether you have a house, whether you have a car, whether you own a part of your business, all of those things. The ownership society is the pathway to success and wealth in this country. Okay? Period. And a lot of that is tied up in education because you have to be smart enough in order to make the best decisions for yourself. A lot of this conversation about what the Pac-12 football players want is going to get lost in a debate between two different sides. Oh, pay them or don't pay them, right? That's where a lot of this energy is going to get distracted. Here is the facts. This is an incredibly complicated legal situation that I don't think most people who are discussing it have really contemplated. I'm going to put my lawyer hat on for you right now, okay? So you want 50% of the revenue produced by your sport, but you also want no other scholarships to be lost. That's not possible, okay? So let me just give you a rough walkthrough of what the college athletic business is like right now, okay? The way that college athletics works is men's basketball and football are pretty much the only sports in college athletics that make money. Every other sport, now there are exceptions. Inevitably, when I say this, somebody's like, well, did you know at UConn women's basketball makes money? And did you know at University of Tennessee women's, by and large, the only sports that make money, with some small exceptions in college athletics, are football and men's basketball. Okay? Every other sport loses money. The way that the athletic departments fund themselves is based on the profits that they make from football and men's basketball. People show up, they buy season tickets, they go to those games, and that allows a women's track athlete to get a scholarship. That allows a men's swimmer to get a scholarship because people won't pay enough money to go watch the track team. They won't pay enough to go watch the men's swimming team. All of those sports lose money. So the challenge that you begin with here is, if you want half of the money that you make, which, by the way, is the same rate that NFL players who are professionals get, then you have to acknowledge that you are not in a professional athletics environment. You are part of an educational institution. And that educational institution allows college athletics to exist and gives out scholarships to everyone across the entire collegiate athletic department based on the success of football and men's basketball. Okay? Now, if you want 50% of revenues, first of all, it's not possible without destroying basically every college athletic department. So if you want to be paid, then virtually every other scholarship athlete who gets the money that you make now would cease to exist. Okay? The larger context here is only men's athletes and men's teams make money in college athletics right now. So every woman that is on scholarship in college athletics, if you get half of the money that you make, they'll be gone. They won't have the ability to get scholarships anymore for athletics. But more importantly, that's actually illegal under federal law because there's something called Title IX. And Title IX requires that any academic institution provide equal numbers of scholarships roughly for women and men. It's actually pegged to the overall enrollment rates of universities. And not only does football blow up any possibility of other scholarships existing, but because football takes up 85 scholarships, and all of the scholarship athletes are male, all of the women's athletic departments actually have a lot more scholarships to give out because they have to keep up and have even numbers of scholarships out there. Well, if all these Pac-12 football players get paid half of the revenue that they are creating, then all of these scholarships would be lost under Title IX. Which would mean that you are breaking federal law, meaning the athletic departments cannot, on its most basic level, agree with what the players have requested. Moreover, if you pay all of these players, right now, women have to get the same thing as men. So they don't have the ability. And look, right now, if you get a stipend or you get cost of attendance or any of those things, all scholarship students are treated the same, whether they are the starting quarterback or whether they are a women's 100-meter sprinter or a men's high diver. All of them get the same cost of attendance stipends. So this is not, here's the challenge. The Pac-12 players are making demands as if they are in a for-profit business, and they are not. They are at nonprofit institutions which actually exist in order to provide educational opportunities, not to maximize overall revenue and profit. If they were only profit-based motivated companies, they would not do anything other than play basketball and football, but that is not what they do. So what the Pac-12 players have requested, and I've got no issue with it at all, I'm a capitalist, I want them to get as much money as they possibly can, is illegal. And most people are not going to be sophisticated enough in my business to even analyze this and explain why it is an issue because they don't understand the basics of this conversation. So they'll come on, and I don't blame them because they lack the tools to discuss this intelligently. They'll come on and they'll argue about whether players should be paid or whether players shouldn't be paid. And they'll take the side of the Pac-12 or they'll take the side of the players. They'll argue without giving you any of the specifics underlying the argument. And this is one of the problems with social media today. And I'm going to talk about this some with Jason Whitlock at some point, I promise. We create artificial binaries. An artificial binary is the idea that everything can be answered by saying yes or no, or that if you do X, Y will occur, and we don't consider any of the complexities. Let me give you an example. With the coronavirus, whether you agree with the lockdowns or you don't, the lockdown decision was an artificial binary because it didn't consider all of the factors that were at play outside of the lockdown, right? If you're going to lock down the country, 40 million people are going to lose their jobs. The number of people dying of drug overdoses is going to skyrocket. The number of people out there who are going to have issues, young kids, with child abuse is going to skyrocket. The number of kids who are going to get a worse education because they can't go to school is going to skyrocket. You might lower the overall number of coronavirus infections, but it's not a yes or no switch. It's not a light switch that you flip up or down and you're like, oh, do we want light or do we not? It's a multifaceted factor. And social media does not do well with this because social media creates heroes and villains and there's no middle ground. Something is either the best or it's the worst. There's nobody who's like, well, it's kind of okay. Most of life is kind of okay, right? Most of it is. Most of it's not exhilarating. And most of it's not the most awful thing you've ever seen. But on social media, everything is either the best or the worst. And so we're going to end up with people lining up on two different sides, and they're going to be fighting, and you're seeing it happen right now with what's going on with athletes taking stands. People are like, oh, defund the police. Or people are like, hey, Blue Lives Matter. And I'm like, well, can we look at, defund the police, Black Lives Matter, defund, like all these different arguments? I'm like, no. How about we just punish bad policemen and let good policemen keep doing their job? That's where the vast majority of the public is, right? The vast majority of the public is not on these extremes that are driving our conversation. Pay the players, never pay the players. Defund the police. And then the opposite side, I don't even know what the opposite side of defund the police. Sometimes there's not even another side. That one side is just so strident, where he's like, no, I think we should still, pay the police and punish bad policemen. It's like, yeah, that's what 90% of people who are reasonably intelligent end up there. All right. So I am in favor of compensating people for their talents as much as you can, but not within a nonprofit-based system. The issue with college athletes being underpaid is a function of pro sports leagues not providing another pathway to go pro. College actually makes a lot of sense for a lot of people, but not for everybody. My belief is if you are 18 years old, you should be able to go pro and make as much money as you possibly can. But that's not the college model. The college model is you're going to go, you're going to get an education, and oh, by the way, you're also going to be able to develop as an athlete. That's the right path for the vast majority of athletes because most of us aren't good enough to actually go pro in a sport. So if you're fortunate enough to play a college sport and be an athlete, that's great. But at some point, your career is going to end and you have to go pro in something else, which is what the vast, vast majority of us do. Whether you start in Little League or you're playing in high school, almost everybody at some point in time has to hang up the dream of becoming a pro athlete and instead becomes a professional doing something else. And so the big flaw here in the argument that the Pac-12 is making that most people are not going to pick up on is they can't get the money that they think they are entitled to because it's not legal to give it to them under existing federal law. If the football players want 50% of the revenue that they are getting, that violates Title IX. It also blows up the idea of other athletes being able to get scholarships because the entire athletic department is run based on football players and basketball players producing audiences and money. Their sports are actually profitable. So that's a complex answer. I'm not sure that anybody who represents the Pac-12 can say it any better than what I just did. And I'm not sure that social media allows complex discussions to take place. Because on social media, you either have to be for something or against it. Hey, let's consider it. Let's consider all the permutations, all the factors at play, is not a valid perspective to have. And so these players who are saying, hey, we're going to sit out and we're not going to play unless we get paid, well, there's actually not a solution here that ends with you getting paid. It's not actually possible when you look at the real data here and try to contemplate it in an intelligent fashion. And this is not an easy answer to give because everybody wants their side to be to be right and to be rewarded, but the Pac-12 demands are not possible to be fulfilled, and this is a long-form conversation. In fact, it's such a long-form conversation that tomorrow, because we got Jason Whitlock joining us here in a minute, tomorrow I'm actually going to open up the phones and I'm going to let you guys ask questions about this because I want to have an intelligent discussion about it. I'll bring in the crew. We'll all debate it and discuss it in what I'm sure will be the most intelligent fashion you will hear anywhere in sports media. The problem is, right now, these players are making demands that aren't in any way able to be granted by the Pac-12, even if the Pac-12 wanted to grant them. And this, by the way, is indicative of what's happening in a larger scale on social media all day long, every day. People decide to make arguments that aren't in any way rooted in factual reality, and then other people who are not very sophisticated jump in line behind them. And before long, you got people saying, wait a minute, how did we end up here? And I think that's where we're headed in the Pac-12. Because I guarantee you today, people who aren't very sophisticated about their knowledge here, because they didn't go to law school, because they haven't actually read any of the cases that apply here or studied the way that college athletic departments are structured, are just going to be like, yeah, the athletes deserve more money. Okay, well, where's it going to come from? And who are you taking from in order to give them scholarship money? And how does that impact existing federal obligations under the law? That's not a conversation you're going to hear very many places other than here. And that's why we're growing, and that's why we're dominating. I'm in favor of everybody making more money off their talents. I want to make as much money. I want you to make as much money as you can. But that money has to come from somewhere. It's not like it just appears magically. And as a result, there are a lot of challenges here. And I don't think the players, certainly not in the next month before football games are scheduled or the next 6 weeks before football games are scheduled, are going to be able to get a solution that is very equitable in their minds. And I don't think the Pac-12 is set up to be able to get this done either.